This woman grabs the wrong suitcase at terminal, unaware the billionaire owner who can't forget her perfume. When she walked away with the wrong suitcase, she didn't know it belonged to a man who had everything money could buy, except peace. What he found inside was not clothing, but fragments of her soul, and a perfume he could never forget. Before we dive deeper into this story, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because every week, we bring you unforgettable stories that touch the heart and remind us of life's hidden miracles. Don't miss the next one. When the city slept, Adrian Vale often found himself awake in the glow of airport terminals. They suited him, their glass walls, endless motion, and the quiet anonymity of people passing through, bound nowhere permanent. He stood there that night, surrounded by rolling luggage and muffled announcements, a figure of sharp lines in a world blurred by movement. The newspapers called him a titan of steel, the man who could bend skylines to his will. Yet in truth, Adrian Vale was simply a man who had built fortresses of glass and power to protect himself from everything he had lost. He carried himself with poise, tailored suit, leather briefcase, silence so practiced it felt like a second skin. But inside, silence was not peace. It was absence, the echo of his father's sudden death, the bitter taste of a marriage that had dissolved without a final fight, the estrangement of a brother who had chosen escape over family. Adrian had grown rich in the currency of control, but bankrupt in the things that made him human. The world saw only the perfection. They never saw how he lingered in terminals not because of efficiency, but because they were full of departures. Departures reminded him of all the people who had left. Elsewhere in that same terminal, Lila Hart moved with a very different kind of weight. Her coat was frayed at the sleeves, her shoes worn thin, but she clutched her old sketchbook as though it were treasure. Inside were pages alive with color, oceans brushed in cobalt, cities glowing under lanterns, portraits of a sister whose laughter would never return. She had promised her sister she would keep painting, even when the world demanded she surrender her dreams for survival. But promises grew heavy after loss. Her sister's absence was a shadow she could not outrun, though she tried. The terminal was noisy, voices over speakers, rolling luggage, impatient footsteps, but to Lila, everything sounded muted, as though she moved in water. She kept her scarf close to her throat, a faint perfume clinging to its threads, a scent her sister had once bought her on a whim. For when you need reminding that life can still be beautiful, her sister had said. Lila had worn it ever since, though the bottle was nearly empty. Adrian and Lila passed each other without noticing at first, he with his leather case of contracts and controlled order, she with her suitcase patched with stickers from places she had never truly visited, only dreamed of. The crowd pressed them together briefly, her hand brushing against his arm before they parted like strangers in a current. And yet, in that small disruption, fate leaned in. At the baggage claim, amid the shuffle of identical black cases circling endlessly, Lila reached for hers in haste. She was distracted, fumbling for her ticket, the scarf slipping from her shoulder. The suitcase she grabbed felt heavier than usual, but the flight was boarding, and she hurried on without a second thought. Adrian collected his case later, wheeled it through polished corridors, and into the waiting car that would take him to a penthouse suite high above the city. 4 hours, he didn't notice. 4 hours, the mistake went undisturbed. It wasn't until the quiet of the hotel room pressed down on him that he unlatched the case. Expecting files, pressed shirts, and the controlled familiarity of his world, Adrian instead found a scattering of charcoal pencils, worn sketchbooks, and folded letters tied with string. A faded photograph slipped onto the carpet, 2 sisters laughing in the sunlight, one of them the woman from the terminal. And then the scent. Faint but unmistakable, like jasmine after rain. He froze. It struck him not as perfume, but as memory, his mother's perfume, a fragrance he had not allowed himself to recall in decades. His chest tightened. He sat there for a long time, surrounded by fragments of a stranger's life, more intimate than anything in his own carefully curated world. Adrian Vale, who had faced billion-dollar negotiations without blinking, found himself unsettled by something as fragile as the lingering perfume of a stranger's scarf. And somewhere blocks away, Lila Hart dragged a suitcase into her modest rented room, breathless, only to discover that it wasn't hers at all. Inside were silk ties, cufflinks, and documents embossed with Adrian Vale's name. Her heart sank. Her sketches, her letters, her memories, they were gone. The mistake had been made. But neither of them yet understood. The wrong suitcase was the beginning of everything. Have you ever experienced a small accident or coincidence that changed the course of your life? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to read it. Adrian Vale sat alone in the penthouse suite, its windows overlooking the city like a silent kingdom. He should have been reviewing the documents for tomorrow's deal, a merger that would secure his company's dominance for decades, but the suitcase lay open before him, its contents spreading like a confession. The sketchbooks fascinated him. Pages filled with color and motion, streets humming with lantern light, seas exploding in blues and silvers, faces rendered with a tenderness he had long forgotten. They were alive, unafraid of imperfection. Adrian turned the pages slowly, as though handling something sacred. He found letters, bound with fraying ribbon. Out of respect, or fear of trespassing, he did not open them. But he touched the envelopes, feeling the weight of words unsent. The scent lingered most of all. That faint perfume, delicate but stubborn, clung to the papers and fabric. He closed his eyes and was 12 again, standing in a quiet house, watching his mother prepare for an evening out. She had kissed his forehead, her perfume soft as a promise. She never returned, an accident that left silence in her place. Adrian inhaled sharply, pushing the memory away. But memory, once stirred, refused to be buried again. Across the city, Lila's panic grew. She had torn through the suitcase, her hands trembling as she uncovered shirts folded with precision, ties resting in velvet boxes, papers stamped with legal seals. Every object screamed wealth, order, a life alien to hers. Her sketchbooks were gone. The letters she wrote to her sister, her most private confessions, were in the hands of a stranger. Her chest tightened. How could she explain losing the last fragments of her sister's presence? She found his name embossed on a portfolio, Adrian Vale. She knew it. Everyone did. Headlines spoke of him with awe or resentment, the empire builder, the untouchable. He was as unreachable as the towers that bore his name. Yet now, fate had tied her life to his, however briefly. The next morning, she returned to the terminal with the suitcase clutched like contraband. Her scarf trailed in the wind, the perfume faint but persistent. She rehearsed apologies under her breath, bracing for humiliation. Adrian was already waiting. His assistant had tracked her arrival easily. Billionaires did not search blindly. He stood by the window of the terminal lounge, tall, composed, watching travelers pass. When Lila approached, her steps faltered. "Mr. Vale," she said softly, holding out the suitcase. "This is yours." Her voice was apologetic but steady. He turned, his gaze cool but unreadable, and accepted the case without a word. The silence stretched, and Lila's cheeks burned. "I'm sorry," she continued quickly. "It was an accident. I wasn't paying attention and—" "And you walked away with my life," Adrian interrupted, his tone flat. He set her suitcase beside him, untouched. Lila's stomach twisted. "I didn't mean—" "I know," Adrian said. His eyes flicked briefly to the scarf at her throat. The scent reached him again, stirring something fragile inside. Lila glanced at her case but didn't reach for it. "Did you open it?" Adrian did not answer right away. He should have lied. He should have said no. But the truth lingered between them. "Yes." Her breath caught. "Those were private." "I know," he said again, but his voice was softer this time, almost apologetic. "I didn't mean to invade. I thought it was mine. By the time I realized, I couldn't stop." Her eyes flickered with pain and embarrassment. "Then you've seen too much." She reached for the suitcase, but he placed his hand lightly on it, halting her. "I saw sketches," Adrian said quietly. "They were alive." Lila froze, caught off guard by the gentleness in his voice. Compliments were rare in her world. Yet she distrusted him, this man who stood in skyscrapers above the world. "They're nothing," she murmured, her guard rising. "Just memories." "Memories can be everything," Adrian replied. The words surprised even him. The silence stretched again, filled with unspoken things. Lila finally pulled the suitcase to her side, clutching it like a shield. "I'll be careful next time," she whispered. "Thank you for not keeping them." She turned to leave, eager to escape the weight of his gaze. But Adrian found himself speaking before she disappeared into the crowd. "Your perfume," he said suddenly. She paused, startled, half-turning. "What about it?" "It reminded me of something I'd forgotten," Adrian admitted, his voice rough with honesty. "Someone." Lila held his eyes for a heartbeat, then looked away. Scents do that. They remember for us. And then she was gone, her scarf trailing behind her, leaving Adrian in the sterile lounge with a suitcase full of order and a heart suddenly in disarray. Do you believe chance encounters can awaken memories or change the path of your life? Share your thoughts in the comments. Adrian Vale was not a man easily unsettled. Yet days after the suitcase exchange, the scent of jasmine still lingered in his mind. He carried it into meetings, into dinners with executives, into nights where the city stretched out beneath him like an empire he no longer wanted to rule. He had lived years without remembering his mother's perfume, without allowing memory to pierce the steel walls he built around himself. But Lila Hart had slipped past those defenses, not with intention, but with something far more dangerous, her unguarded humanity. For the first time in years, Adrian found himself curious about someone not for what they could gain him, but for who they were. Lila, meanwhile, tried to forget. She wanted to lock the encounter away, tell herself it was over. She had her suitcase back, her letters, her sketchbooks. Nothing else should matter. Yet each time she opened her sketches, she thought of him holding them, this man who had lived in glass towers yet called them alive. She could not decide if it was intrusion or validation. One evening, in the dim light of her rented room, she stood before a blank canvas. For weeks she had painted only for survival, creating works she knew would sell cheaply. But tonight, the memory of Adrian's quiet words pushed her hand. Her brush moved, painting not what she thought the world wanted, but what she felt. The canvas bloomed with grief and resilience, oceans lit by impossible light. And she hated herself for wondering if he would understand it. Adrian's assistant had gathered information easily. Artists left trails in online galleries, local exhibits, unpaid invoices. Within days, Adrian stood in a small gallery tucked between cafes, where Lila's paintings leaned against whitewashed walls, unsold and uncelebrated. She noticed him instantly, the billionaire looking out of place among cracked wooden floors and canvases stained with raw emotion. "You followed me," she said flatly, crossing her arms. "I came to see the art," Adrian replied. Her expression hardened. "People like you don't come here." "People like me?" "The kind who think lives are portfolios. Who think you can buy what you want." Adrian absorbed the words without flinching. "You think I came here to buy something? Didn't you?" "No," he said simply. "I came because your work unsettled me." Lila faltered. It wasn't the words. Plenty of people had dismissed her work, a few had praised it. But no one had admitted to being unsettled. No one had admitted that her art had reached them in a place beyond words. Still, she did not let down her guard. "Then you've seen what you wanted. You can leave now." But Adrian didn't move. His gaze lingered on a painting of two sisters on a sunlit hill, their laughter captured in strokes of gold. "Your sister?" he asked softly. Lila's breath caught. "She's gone." "I'm sorry," Adrian said, and there was no performance in his voice. For a long moment, neither spoke. The gallery was silent, except for the faint hum of traffic outside. Finally, Lila whispered, "Why does someone like you care?" Adrian looked at her then, not as a billionaire, not as the figure from headlines, but as a man hollowed by absences. "Because I know what it is to lose someone, and to pretend success fills the void. It doesn't." The rawness in his words startled her. It was not pity, not arrogance. It was recognition. Over the following weeks, their paths crossed again. Sometimes by accident, at a cafe near the gallery, at a park where she sketched. Sometimes not, when Adrian invited her to dinner under the pretense of discussing art, though both knew it was more than that. Conversations were cautious, layered with silences. Lila asked him once why he built towers that scraped the sky. He hesitated before answering, "Because I thought if I built high enough, I could rise above the past." "And did you?" she asked. His gaze lingered on her scarf, on the faint perfume that haunted him. "No. The past waits, no matter how high you climb." Still, tension threaded between them. Lila feared his wealth would consume her, turn her into something ornamental. Adrian feared that opening his heart would mean repeating every loss he'd ever endured. And yet, neither walked away. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing is not falling, it is the terrifying hope that someone might catch you. If someone unsettled your life by forcing you to feel again, Would you lean into it or push them away? Share your thoughts below. The night was colder than usual, the kind of chill that seemed to slip beneath coats and skin. Adrian stood on the balcony of his penthouse, the city glittering beneath him like a sea of broken glass. Yet for all its brilliance, it felt empty. Behind him, Lila lingered, arms wrapped around herself. He had invited her not with promises, but with hesitation, as if unsure whether he wanted her to see his world or to walk away from it forever. "This place feels like a cage," she murmured, her eyes tracing the sleek lines of marble and glass. "A beautiful one, but still a cage." Adrian exhaled, his jaw tight. "That's exactly what it is." She turned to him then, searching his face. "Why do you stay in it?" The question struck like a blade. For years, Adrian had avoided it, filling silence with contracts, boardrooms, and the unending pursuit of control. But now, under her steady gaze, he couldn't escape. He looked out over the city. "Because once, I thought building higher meant escaping what I couldn't face. My father's shadow. My mother's absence. The choices I made that cost me people I cared about." His voice broke on the last words. It startled even him. Lila stepped closer, her scarf trailing softly in the wind. "You don't have to keep carrying it alone." Adrian shook his head. "And what if I let someone in, only to lose them again? What if I fail them the way I've failed before?" Her eyes glistened, the pain in them no stranger. "Loss doesn't mean you failed. It means you loved. And isn't that worth the risk?" The silence between them throbbed, heavy with everything unspoken. Adrian could feel the weight of years pressing down, the grief, the guardedness, the empire that meant nothing without someone to share it. And then he caught it again, the faintest trace of jasmine in her scarf, the same fragrance that had haunted him since the airport. He closed his eyes. "That night at the terminal. I couldn't forget your perfume. It wasn't just the scent. It was the way it made me feel. Alive. Haunted. Human." Lila's breath trembled. "And I couldn't forget the way you held my sketches. As if they weren't just paper. As if you saw me." For the first time, their walls cracked fully. Adrian reached for her hand, his fingers tentative, as though touching something sacred. Lila let him, though her pulse quickened with fear and longing. "You're afraid of cages," he whispered. "And I'm afraid of falling. Maybe we can learn to be free together." Tears slipped down Lila's cheeks, though her smile was soft, fragile. "Or maybe we'll shatter each other." "Maybe," he admitted. "But I'd rather shatter with you than remain unbroken and empty." The city hummed far below, unaware of the battle waged in one man's heart. In that quiet, suspended moment, Adrian Vale, billionaire, architect of empires, prisoner of his own past, chose something he hadn't in years. He chose to risk being human again. Their kiss was not the desperate kind of fairy tales, but slow, trembling, as if testing whether broken things could still fit together. It was a promise, not of perfection, but of trying. And for Adrian, that was everything. Do you believe broken people can truly heal together, or must they first heal alone? Share your heart below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Morning light poured into the penthouse, soft and golden, painting long shadows across the polished floor. For the first time in years, Adrian didn't wake to silence that felt suffocating. Instead, he woke to the faint rustle of pages and the soft sound of Lila's laugh, quiet, tentative, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She sat by the wide glass windows, her sketchbook open on her knees, capturing the skyline in quick, graceful strokes. Adrian lingered in the doorway, watching her, realizing he had never known peace could look like this. "You're staring," she teased without turning, sensing him. "I'm wondering," he said softly, "how something so simple feels richer than all the things I've spent a lifetime building." Lila closed her sketchbook gently, meeting his eyes. "Because maybe what you've been missing wasn't something to build, but someone to share it with." The days that followed weren't without struggle. Adrian wrestled with board members who noticed his absence, with memories that rose uninvited, with his instinct to retreat into control. Lila fought her own doubts, fearful of losing herself in a life that seemed larger than she'd ever dreamed. Yet, instead of retreating, they leaned into the discomfort. Adrian began visiting the art district with her, supporting her exhibitions quietly, without fanfare. Lila, in turn, challenged him to open up about the fractures of his past, not to erase them, but to accept that brokenness was not weakness. On a rainy afternoon, Adrian returned to the terminal where it all began. This time, he wasn't running from ghosts. He stood with Lila at his side, their fingers intertwined, the scent of her perfume grounding him. "It's strange," he murmured, watching travelers hurry past. "How something as small as a suitcase could change everything." Lila smiled. "Maybe it wasn't the suitcase. Maybe it was that you were ready, even if you didn't know it yet." Adrian's throat tightened. He had lived so long believing his worth was tied to skyscrapers and contracts. Now standing there, he understood. The truest wealth was not what he had built, but what he had almost lost by keeping his heart locked away. That night, back in his penthouse, Adrian placed an old photograph on the mantel, one of him as a boy with his parents before everything fractured. For years, he had kept it hidden in a drawer, afraid of the ache it carried. Now it sat in the open, no longer a wound but a reminder. Lila leaned against him, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. Neither spoke for a long time. Words weren't necessary. Finally, Adrian whispered, "For the first time, I feel like I'm not living in a cage." She tilted her face toward him. "And for the first time, I feel like I've found a home that isn't just a place, but a person." Adrian kissed her hair, closing his eyes. The empire outside the glass still glittered, restless and demanding, but within these walls, something gentler reigned. Not perfection, not certainty, but hope. And that was enough. Do you believe fate brings the right people into our lives at the right time, or is it all choice and courage? Share your thoughts. I'd love to hear your perspective.